Thank you, thank you. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? You're good? Fabulous. So what I want to talk about is maybe relating to the speakers that you see on stage, but I want to frame it maybe a little bit different and maybe also give you some ideas for your startup and what you are looking for, doing in the future. So, as you heard, I'm representing Singularity University. Who heard of Singularity University before? Who heard about it? So there's a few folks in the audience. Great. I think there we are. Can I have my preview screen? So I don't have to turn around all the time? That would be great. Otherwise, I just stop here. So this is what you see when you are on campus at the NASA campus at Singularity. This is actually the structure that Google is building for the robotics division. It's about 150 meters high. So this is where a part of the future will be created. You know that Google bought a robotics company. I want to go back and take us back to a moment in time in history that you probably still remember. It was the invention of the press. Gutenberg invented the press hundreds of years ago. And I want to refer to this as something not only being a technology that created the ability to print a book, it also allowed access to knowledge at that time, which actually made a lot of things possible after that. So it was an incredible moment in human history because the foremost scarce model of knowledge that was only available to a privileged group of people was changed through that moment. And Bob referred to this as well, that the iPhone is only 10 years ago. I think that 10 years ago, when Steve Jobs presented the iPhone, probably we had the Gutenberg moment of our times, because it was not only the entry into a new dimension of how to make a phone call or have a smartphone, because we entered a new era of mobile data, sensors, and everything that you look around right now, the apps that people were mentioning, there wouldn't be any apps right now without this technology that allows us to have GPS and all these things all in one device. So at Singularity, we talk a lot about abundance versus redundancy. And you see this man surrounded by all these computers. And there's a lot of friction around this. At least in Germany, I can say, a lot of people are nervous about our joint future. And they think that we will be lost as human beings surrounded by all these robots. And they might take our jobs. So what we focus on in Singularity is actually these key technologies. It's AI and robotics. It's biotech and bioinformatics, network and computing. It's medicine and nanotechnology. So these technologies are technologies that we think will redefine our future. So this is what we try to train people and explain them how that might have impact on their business. And there's a second side to it, which I think is very relevant. And I hope it's relevant to some entrepreneurs here in the audience as well. Singularity tries to explain that the knowledge about technology and what you can do might have an impact on humanity as well. So if we train you to understand tech in a way, you might be, someone, solving a problem that you see here, because we're facing a lot of challenges still. If you look at security, we just had this assault 2 days ago. If you look at water, energy, food, environment, so these are all areas that we think technology can help solve. And Peter Diamandis, who's the founder of Singularity, always says, if you want to become a billionaire, reach 1 billion people. If you solve a problem around water, you probably reach a couple of billion people, and you become a billionaire overnight. So these are the challenges that we try to address with the education around technology. So how do you do this? So when we ask people to come and participate in the trainings we do, we ask them to actually work on ideas where they can reach 1 billion people within 5 years. Sounds bold? Yes, It has to be bold, because we think you have to work on ideas that are much larger than yourself, much larger, right? So, coming back to the abundance idea, abundance is something that we actually are not used to, because we come from models of scarcity. Everything is scarce. You have to, pay for things because they are not around, and the whole marketing model is that you work with scarcity, and the more scarce things are, the more expensive they are, the more exclusive they are. We think that these technologies can actually make a very big change. I will show you some examples after that. Abundance is actually happening worldwide. We looked at some numbers from the OECD, and they are hard to read right now, so I would just quickly flip through them. But what you see here are graphs, like the top one is extreme poverty. And what we see since the 1800s is that extreme poverty is going down. Literacy, the bottom one, is going up, right? So these things are happening slowly over time. And technology will play a very important role. Child mortality as well. Vaccination as well. These things are happening, right? We are not used to even think of times where almost 50% of children would die within the first 5 years. Something impossible for us to think about. But technology and progress helped us address these issues. And we think, in training people and understanding what technology can do, we can actually help solve these issues as well. This is just something I want to address to you. One of the most interesting areas that we look on is solar power. Solar power was underestimated by all the experts we know. As you remember, there's a lot of discussion going on about, there's a global discussion about reducing fossil fuels, how we can do it. I come from Germany. Germany took a big step by subsidizing alternative energy production in a big way. If we only look at the price drop in solar power and also what Elon Musk is doing right now with Tesla, it's pretty amazing. And what you see here, these squares, the smallest one you see is actually the energy that Germany needs for 1 year. If we would place a solar panel of that size in the Sahara, it would produce enough energy to serve Germany as a whole for 1 year. The next one in the middle is all 25 European countries, and the biggest one is the world energy consumption. And that's only possible because we have an increase in effectiveness in solar energy. So what we always try to explain is that we have a hard time to understand what exponential growth and development is, because we come from a background in school and also humanity where we actually are used to a linear step. Like you do one step, which is a linear step, right? Like this. You take 30 meters and you go 30 steps up, right? So what do you think is an exponential? How far is 30 exponential steps? Who has an idea? Just tell me a number. Front row. Just any number. There? What was it? 13. Okay. Well, it's 26 times around the planet. 26 times around the planet. So 30 steps in linear thinking are just 30 meters or 30 steps. If you do the same thing in 30 exponential steps, it's 26 times around Earth. So for us, we are very bad at forecasting. I do this all the time in trainings with audiences, and there's hardly anybody guessing that number because it's very hard to understand. If you look at that curve, and that's a curve that is always related to it with the Moore's law, what we try to pin down here is from the 1900, there's actually an exponential curve that you can see here. And the mapping, what you see here is the exponential growth in computing. And the forecast here, which is something based on Ray Kurzweil's vision, who is the co-founder of Singularity, is you see the price performance for $1,000. Like what performance can I buy at what year for $1,000? And he says that we probably have the computing power of one human brain by 2020, maybe in the early 2020s. And we probably will be at computing power of all human brains between 2040 and 2050. So that means everything that you have in your pocket here, this is the supercomputer. And we don't know because we get used to it, it's so normal for us to have it. But actually, the computing power of this computer is more computing power that Bill Clinton had at the Pentagon when he entered his first presidency. Hard to imagine, right? That it was about the same speed and computing power in the whole of the Pentagon they had. So let's look back a little bit to tell you what incredible speed we have here. This is a Cray. It's one of the supercomputers at that time, probably filled one of the booths down there. It was so big. It had 80 megaflops of computing power, presented in 1975, and it cost almost $9 million. The iPhone 7, only 30 years later, cost $750. And the computing power you see here is 172 gigaflops. Another example, this is 24 teraflops. It's the Pix2, is usually used for autonomous driving. And the price is now less than $1,000. So we have an incredible surge in computing power, and at the same time we have an incredible drop of the price. And this is something that experts say will not stop. So we walk into this future of abundance, meaning that probably there will be no limit anymore in computing power, and at the same time there will be no price point anymore. So computing power will probably be abundant. We'll just have it in the cloud, and Bob referred to the cloud as one of the most important things. And the important thing here, if you look at this chart, is that we try to teach a singularity, that it's not about a single technology, but it's actually about the convergence of all these technologies that create these unexpected moments, these surprises that we don't know about. So, just one example, the 3D printing of a bridge is something that probably would have been in a science fiction movie. It's now reality, right? It's happening. There's even a house that was printed in China with a 3D printer. I think the latest one was even printed in 24 hours. So they could print a house in one day, just by a robot. We had one robot here on stage, and by the way, my experience is they never work on big stages, the conferences, they never do. I don't know. We tried it like a couple of times, and it never works. But in closed rooms, they really are great. And these are just some examples, like Pepper and the others, like social robots, robots in healthcare. We will see many of those robots entering our private space. And they will make our life easier. They will be our interface. They will maybe help elder people to be more safe, to remind them that they have to take their medicine, like all these things. And these technologies combined, like AI, robotics, will dramatically change the way we interact in our social systems. So this example, Bob mentioned as well, was a surprise to many people, because DeepMind's Alphago computer only last year was beating the Go world champion. And it was even worse. I think out of 5 games, he lost 4, and Alphago got better in every step. So maybe some of you remember that we had these battles in chess as well. I remember that there was a battle in chess, and it was a great thing that, like a Garry Kasparov, I think, was trying to beat Watson, or like an earlier stage of AI. Today, nobody's looking at this anymore, because none of those chess champions would have a chance against these computers. They have no chance. So it's pretty boring. So today, the exciting thing is 2 humans, playing chess against each other, because it's too boring to have a computer joining the game. I will not go into blockchain, but we support, Bob's mentioning here as well, that blockchain will dramatically, change the way we do business in the future and help as well in transparency. So another example here is everything that is close to AR or VR company called Magic Leap. They're experimenting with amazing stuff. If we would all maybe have glasses, maybe my presentation would be taking place right in the middle of the room, and we would all watch a 3D model of my presentation. Probably this will not take much longer. Maybe in a couple of years we will do this. It will be very simple. Made in Space, one example, it's a Singularity startup that was creating a printer for the space station, because they were looking at the fact that it takes a lot of money and also the weight to put it in a rocket and bring all the stuff up. Why not create a printer that you can use on the ISS station, and if anything is broken or if you need anything, you just print it. So they just developed that technology to be able to do this. We heard a lot about fintech in the morning, and a lot of it about the investments. And Citigroup is experimenting with this as well. They look into AI, and probably in the future, if you look at your depot or whatever you want to do, probably it's an AI talking to you, or maybe not a human person anymore. Maybe this AI will be much better and more reliable and makes no mistakes compared to a real person. Of course, there's always a flip side. As I say here, you see an example from a news from the news that the Japanese company is replacing more and more workers with AI. I think this is something that we as society and humankind, we have to discuss this. We have to discuss how we want to proceed looking at our joint future if maybe more and more people will lose their job. Because we can compare this to the technological revolution that took place more than 100 years ago. We had an industrial revolution where many, many industries were disrupted by big machines and these new big factories. So, we're not talking about something new, but it's actually something that throughout history, it always happened. We always had technology replace an older technology. And there were always protests, by the way. We always had protests against, the new technology. Like we had one of the biggest market, in horse riding. This horse riding transport system. They were not happy when the first car showed up. Mr. Benz and Mr. Ford, when they came in the streets and they said that you have to stop this. This is killing people. It will be dangerous for everybody. So, and of course, within a couple of years, all the horse-based transport was killed. They all lost their jobs. Also, the horses lost their jobs. But, if you look into this, and there's many, many other examples in industries where you can see this, what I think is important that we have to discuss this jointly. There's a hedge fund as well that's automizing, so I will go through this. Facial recognition, very funny because I took this example because they use a software and facial recognition when it comes to, looking at the CEO presenting the numbers of the company to check if he is, excited or not when he's presenting the numbers of the company. So you can see if his blood pressure is going up or not, to see if he's telling the truth or not, which is a little scary, right? Because probably we don't want to do this, but imagine these technologies are all around, and we have to decide where to use it. So, this is the typical 6D example that Peter Diamandis from Singularity always uses. He says, it's the 6Ds of exponential technologies. They are deceptive, so they are underestimated for a long time. They digitize, they dematerialize, they demonetize, disrupt, and then they also democratize. These are the 6Ds. I'll give you an example of technologies that we have in our iPhone today and the value of what they were costing only like 25, 30 years ago. And it's pretty amazing that even if you look at this in the 80s, there was video conferencing. Video conferencing was available. But it was just very expensive. It was there, but it was accessible for large corporate, but it cost more than $250,000. GPS was available. It cost like more than $100,000 in 1982. There was a digital voice recorder from Sony. It was costing $2,500. So we summed up all of these things. And if you would have bought all these technologies single and would put it together, you would come to an estimate of a value of today about $900,000. And today, all these technologies are free. You download the app, and you have it in your iPhone, in your smartphone. So all these technologies, they had a market. The market is gone, right? So this is something we have to understand, that the abundance, the access to technology dramatically changes the way we can do business in the future. The cost to enter a market is not to be compared to what we had to pay, a couple of decades ago. It's so cheap to enter a market and create a global market for your company as it has never been before. And this is not stopping, because we're adding more people to the internet, right? We probably add 1 or 2 billion more people in the next 5 to 7 years as users. So this is a curve that we always use at Singularity. This curve describes the fact that for a long time, this deceptive, this underestimation of technology is happening. And there's 2 examples that are great. AI is one. In Germany, we call it künstliche Intelligenz, AI, artificial intelligence. And I remember when I was at university, there were papers, there was research being done at an institute in Karlsruhe in the south. But you could never actually experience it, right? It was you couldn't grab it. People were writing papers about it, but it took so long, and it was just something where you say, there's nothing really happening. What's going on there? And then you have that moment where this curve goes up, and it goes up in an exponential way, not linear anymore, right? If you use Siri or any other device today, Siri learns with every usage. And we have a couple of million people using it every day, probably 20, 50, 100 million people use it every day. So the learning curve that Bob was referring to as well, these algorithms, they get better every second, right? So once this deceptive moment is taking over, you see the linear curve is this is what we call the path to doom. If you stay on that linear curve with your business, you're done, right? If you don't understand the disruptive power of exponential technologies here, you will be out of business. And we call this upper part as well, this is this amazement moment where you think, wow, what's going on? Why is it suddenly there? Like 3D printing. 3D printing has been around for more than 30 years. Now suddenly you think, why is this happening that now suddenly you get all these things? Like these printing houses, robots, whatever. Where does it come from? It's not a surprise. It's been around for decades. People have been working on it. The difference is that the computing power that allows us now to create these new printers is just unparalleled, right? Unparalleled before. Okay, so some examples, and you know all of them. We just try to frame it in our framework of dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization. These are all examples, right? These are all examples where you can say, well, this is actually not good. I like my bookstore. I love my bookstore. I want to have my bookstore. Yes, but there are bookstores that probably will survive. They will survive, but generally you can say that Amazon killed most of the bookstores in many, many countries. Same here, iTunes. Right? I don't know if you have a record store here in Gdansk, I'm not sure. In Berlin, there are some that are collectibles, and they sell vinyl again, right? Vinyl was actually gone end of the 90s, and I felt very bad. I have a big collection of vinyl. I thought, oh my God, this is all junk, right? Nobody wants this anymore. Now vinyl is coming back, which is great. But still, iTunes dramatically changed the way we consume music today. And all of these examples here. So I want to continue just with this example here as well, the Hike Group and Airbnb, a company, Airbnb, that has no assets. The old understanding of our business is that we need assets, we need real estate. This is the real value. Airbnb had more stays overnight, I think 60 months ago, for the first time than the largest hotel chain in the world. And it doesn't own any of those places. So this is only a platform. That's the important thing. I will not talk about Kodak because probably you heard that, but the interesting thing is that the market cap of Instagram with only 2 handful of employees was much higher than this company ever achieved. What we see here as well is the time, and this is something I want to address with the speakers before. The time to a company that has a value of $1 billion is getting shorter and shorter, right? And that's one of the networks effect that we have through these technologies. So either you try to beat it yourself as a corporate company or you join. This is an example. Wunderlist company based in Berlin was just bought by Microsoft. And you remember the chart that we saw of the buyers where Apple was missing in the morning? It's mainly the large companies that need these ideas because they can't develop these ideas inside themselves. So this is where the opportunity here is for new business, for your startups. Like, you know, this is where you can actually make a change. So what I want to encourage you is to go back to this moonshot thinking. John F. Kennedy said, why do we go to the moon? We go to the moon because we can, and that's it. You just do it without actually reasoning why. And this is something that we try to, push everybody to say, let's take a step further. Let's make it much bigger. Let's make our idea bigger than it is. And of course, we have people like him who had this so-called reality distortion field. He had his own personal way how he did it. And you probably will find yours as well. Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to actually create it. So I will just ask you, what's the future that you want to create? Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Stephan.
Any questions? Anybody has a question? That's a question right here.
Hey, I have only one question. Can you go back to one of the first slides?
Some of the first slides, okay.
Is it possible?
Which one you mean?
Yeah, I mean this one just before those.
The conversions?
Do you remember?
I think with the technologies.
Yeah, with those technologies.
The technologies.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it's pretty important.
I think it was the first or the.
That one?
No. Further. Just before.
Yeah. Just before?
No.
It was like.
You mean in the beginning?
Technologies.
Yeah,
yes.
Go back.
Yep.
Oh,
this,
one more.
Right here?
This one. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to. Yeah.
You wanted to see it. Okay. Any question to this?
No.
Yeah.
I think this is very.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's very.
Anybody wants to take a picture? Take a picture. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's worth to take a picture.
Yeah, that's a question as well.
Which of those technologies that you show us would be have like most impact for the near future? Not like because you showed like different technologies, different sectors. So, in your opinion, what kind of technology will have a biggest impact in our lives?
Well, I'm not a tech. I don't do forecasting. I'm not the guy. But I think if you talk to experts, they all say that what Bob also said, cognitive computing, like everything that is AI driven, will be probably one of the most important changes that we will see in the future. It's a buzzword. Yeah.
Yeah, from my business perspective, I'm working with like in Martech sector, and everybody is using. We are doing artificial intelligence, but usually it's like rule-based automation.
Yes.
And it's not artificial intelligence; it's a buzzword.
Yeah.
And even if you look to the CB Insights, which they analyzed whole industry, and you showed one of the slides. Yes. Of yours presentation was from the CB Insights. Yes. You can see they're writing a lot about this buzzword, and there's a lot of mistakes, like with the leapfrog.
Yes.
And the leapfrog is actually fake technology. It was a big PR. I think it's, they made something like videos of their technology, but actually they don't know how to make it.
Yes.
Real. So it's a lot of buzzwords. So you have to be cautious and think about it. What is real artificial intelligence, to be honest?
I think we are,
Thank you.
A little bit further away from real intelligence, as you say. But if you look at the big picture, if you look at like history and where we are right now, we will see intelligence happening, right? We're at the very early stage right now. Because of most of the stuff you refer to as well is just machine learning and these are algorithms that are programmed, but that's not intelligence, right? But But we will be there. We will be there. Let it be 5, 10 years, and we will see the first results, right? If you have to decide today, maybe it's a different thing. You're totally right. But I try to just, show you a little bit, bigger picture, and show where you have to actually, put it into the circle within the time frame. Any more questions?
Time's up, Stephan. Time's up. Thank you very much. There is a hot discussion going on. You are not gone, right? You are staying.
No, I'm here for like 45 minutes. If I'm happy to join the conversation.
Feel free to join. And Stephan, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Enjoy. Thank you.